In this video, we're going to take a look at the relationship between users and teams, which is a many-to-many relationship. There's lots of ways you can do this. But the way I like to do it is by making an item that joins the two together. So for example, we have a user profile record. And what we're going to do is we're also going to make a team item that has a bunch of meta information like what's the name of the team and so on. And then we're going to make a third item that joins the two together. And so the way it's going to look as data is it's going to have both the user ID and the team ID referenced in this one single item. And so that's going to be the information as to how these things are joined together. And the other thing that we want to do is we want to be able to ask two questions from our database. We want to ask, in terms of a user, what are all the teams that they're on? And so what that will end up being is we're going to say, give me the user ID 1234 and all the team members. And we've seen this with tasks already, so that's a simple query to make. But we also want to ask a team, what are all the team members that you have? And so what that means is that we actually need to get this item from a different pathway, from a secondary path, a different perspective. We know how to get it from the perspective of a user, but how do we get it from a second owner or a second path? So that's what we're going to look at in this video. So what I've done is, first change I've made in this table is I've actually added something called a GSI. So let's just quickly look at what that is. So when we created our table, we had to specify the primary key and the sort key. And we describe that as a pathway in to find your data. But if you need a secondary pathway into the same item, you need to create a second path, which means you need to create a second set of keys. And that is what this global secondary index is all about. You're basically deciding a second pathway into the same piece of data. And the pathway that I've defined is look at the GSI, which stands for global secondary index. So this is just like PK is a generic name for partition key. I'm using a very generic name here to represent the global secondary index. And so this is a secondary pathway where I'm going to ask for the GSI and the SK. So it's a second way in. So we'll see how that works in a second. So first of all, let me just quickly create some teams. So like I was saying before, we want to create a bunch of metadata on a team, like its name and so on. So in that case, what I like to do is literally call it meta for the sort key. Also, this is the first time we're using something other than user ID in the PK, which is why we called it PK rather than user ID. In this case, we're actually putting in a completely different item, which is a team metadata item right here. So we'll just do that, and we'll create a second team, give it meta. So now we got two teams in our database. Now we need to make that connection. Team members. So let's go into here, and what I'm going to do, I'm just going to write it out and we'll explain what's going on here. So I'm going to make a team 1, 2, 3, 4. This is going to be a team member, and we'll just give it an object, and we'll say this is linked to user 1, 2, 3, 4. So now this is the connection. Team 1, 2, 3, 4 has a team member which is user 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's add another item here. So team 1, 2, 3, 4, team member 1, 2, 3, 5. And we'll say that is team member 1, 2, 3, 5. We'll add one last team member that belongs to team 1, 2, 3, 5, which is the second team. Number 1, 2, 3, 6. And that will be user 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So how can we visualize this? Well, let's go into our aggregate data. And so now what we can see is underneath the user, this is all the stuff that belongs to the user. And if we look at team now, there's a bunch of stuff that belongs to this team 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a metadata, but there's also these team members. which means we can query for team 1, 2, 3, 4 and get all of this information in one query, which is amazing. But if we flip over to the GSI, now just like I was saying before, this is the original pathway into our data. We can query off of this one set of keys, PK and SK, but we just made a secondary pathway into our data, which is GSI. So let's click that. And now we can see this is the same data, but only data that has the GSI set. So now we can also ask the question, user 1, 2, 3, 4, what teams are you on? And we get all the team member items that are related to the user 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we can get the PK off of that item, which is the IDs of all the teams that they're a part of. So this is not different data. This is these team member items here. But you can see that these have a GSI defined, therefore they have a secondary path defined on this item. So if we switch over, we can see the same data that has GSIs defined on them from a different perspective, from a different pathway. So let's take a look at what this looks like in Node.js. So what I have in front of me is just a make file, which is going to create exactly what we had just done in Workbench. So I'm going to create a team member 1, which has a PK of team 1, 2, 3, 4, a team member ID, and then the GSI is the user 1, 2, 3, 4. And instead of just that fake JSON object thing, I'm actually giving people a role here, so that's more of a realistic scenario. So I'm creating 3 members here, and then 2 teams. And so I'm just going to go ahead and create that. Wonderful. And if we check out our database, now we got a bunch of data here. And let's try to query this now. So notice we got GSI1. Only the team members have the GSI1 defined on them. Therefore, these items have 2 pathways in to query them. So let's check out what queries would look like. So if we go to get team info, we can see that I'm doing a query command here. But instead of specifying the SK here, I'm just saying I want to query all items that have a PK of 1, 2, 3, 5. And so that's going to, so that just means whatever the SK is, doesn't matter whether that's meta or team member, just give me all the information that's related to team 1, 2, 3, 5. So let's go ahead and try that out. So we'll go node get team info. And we can see that we get the meta data here. We also get all of the team members that are associated with that team. So in one query, we're getting all that information. And if we wanted to get that same data from the other angle, in that we want to ask for a user, what teams are they on? If we look at this query here, it's very similar, but except we're getting it from the GSI, so we need to define a different index. So in this case, I'm not getting it from the normal index with PK and SK. I'm getting it from the GSI one. And this name here is defined, if you look in your indexes here, it's whatever this name is. And so in this case, I'm saying GSI1 equals user 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm saying begins with team member. So I don't want to get the user's profile or tasks or anything like that. I just want to get the team member items. And so if we check that out, now we're getting all those exact same items, but from the perspective of which user does it belong to.